things. The reason why the federal proposal came about was our perception that there was too much concentration of powers in Metro Manila, where all the seats of the various branches of government are located, and from where decisions to develop parts of the country would usually emanate, including the funding, of course, that goes with these development efforts.
Senator Aquilino Pimentel. Now, at the end of a politician's career, when he starts looking back on what his public service was all about, the word always comes up of whether they're going to leave a legacy or not. Now, Senator Pimentel, as he looks towards the end of his term, is looking towards leaving federalism as his legacy to our country. So tonight, we're going to take a look at his proposal for federalism, something that no one was expecting him or the Senate to put on the table, at least at this time in the year. And we'll try to find out what he's putting forward and whether it's something we should all join in and create a bandwagon for. This is The Explainer, and I'm Manolo Quezon. This is The Explainer, where I explain why issues are issues. Now, our explainee tonight is Bettina Magsaysay, a writer for ANC. Welcome to the show, Bettina. Thanks for being with us. And we're joined in our studio audience by students in ANC's internship program. So they're getting a crash course in what this whole issue is about. Bettina, as we prepare to tackle this subject, would you like to invite our viewers to join in the discussion?
Yes, please. Just text REACT space X space your name and your question or reaction and send to 2366 for Globe and Sun and 231 for Smart. Or you can log on to www.the-explainer.com.
Now, more on federalism after this. Welcome back. I suppose an image like this one, which you see behind me, is what most of us associate with the word federalism and federal. But when these worthies, these gentlemen here, immortalized as the signers of America's Declaration of Independence, when they put pen to paper, whatever association they had in mind was different from the kind of association America actually became. Now, this painting, and it also happens to be on the cover of this book, which we're going to describe in a few minutes, this painting commemorates 1776, but the Continental Congress that the founding fathers of the United States formed and the Independence Declaration that they produced had to work through two constitutions before the United States of America became a truly federal republic in 1789. And they even had to go through a civil war to really settle issues that lingered between the states left over from the birth of the North American Union. Now, I've been enjoying this book, American Creation, which chronicles the main issues that hounded America's founding fathers. But even as it's delightful to ponder what Washington, Jefferson, Adams, and others were quarreling over in the 18th century, we have to ask, why is federalism appealing to us, or at least some of us? Now, the conquest of the territories that now compose the Philippines was undertaken by the Spanish on a kingdom-by-kingdom basis. And upon getting local royalty to accept Spanish sovereignty, the Spanish then reorganized the territories of what has become our country into provinces. At first, the nerve center of these territories was Cebu, and then it became Manila. Now, the Americans, in conquering the Philippines, built on what the Spanish had established and created new provinces of their own. A good example of this is Rizal Province, which was an American creation. Now, they formalized local and provincial governments, taking away the participation of the Catholic Church, fundamental difference from the way things were in the Spanish era. But again, everything was administered from Manila. Now, when we successfully negotiated the restoration of our independence, the writers of the 1935 Constitution were concerned with keeping the country together, since the issue of independence would soon be an accomplished fact. And they felt that it was the independence cause that had kept different Filipinos together and united to a certain extent. So their decision was that they preferred to establish a strong state. And so our development has led to us to being classified as a unitary state, one where there is a strong central government. And of course, there are many of these. All these countries here in blue are unitary states. Now, perhaps the greatest innovation since then to the way our country's been organized was the creation of regions by President Marcos. Now, this was a way to neutralize the tendency of provincial leaders to resist national interference or his own rule. Or, put another way, to force inwardly looking local leaders to somehow work together, at least on a regional basis. Now, this wonderful map here, of course, comes from Wikipedia. Now, since then, we've adopted the concept of autonomous areas, of which the ARMM, or the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, is a prime example. But this still doesn't address federalism, does it? Now, the Spanish never thought of it. The Americans who lived by it didn't transplant it here. So where did it come from? Our revolution began with 8 provinces placed under martial law. We immortalized that on our flag. And then it spread. Now, we had 3 wars of independence, in case we forget. The first was the Katipunan-led revolution from 1896 to 1897. And then there was the Aguinaldo dictatorship from 1898 to 1899. Both of these were aimed against Spain. And then there was our first republic's resistance to American conquest. Now, it was during the Third War of Independence, when the Malolos Republic ruled much of Luzon, that President Aguinaldo had to try to find a way to include the rest of the archipelago. That's the 3 stars that are also immortalized on our flag from 1898. Now, the Visayan Federal Republic was constituted in Iloilo and had to be convinced to recognize the government in Malolos, which it did. But Aguinaldo was less successful in courting the cooperation of the Sultan of Sulu. Now, with the defeat of the First Republic and with the creation of a strong central government in 1935, thinkers and leaders like Salvador Araneta, the man on this postage stamp, remained dissatisfied with the setup and, looking back to what might have been in the 1890s, revived federalism as a way to reorganize our country. And these proposals emerged in the 1960s and 1970s. Now, the idea has remained interesting to some in the Visayas and of increasing interest to some in Mindanao. President Arroyo, for one, has been moderately interested in federalism, and in 2005 and 2006, she expressed support for it in theory. But our past and present allies have been more interested in parliamentary government than in a federal setup. Former President Ramos, for one, has been ambivalent about federalism, and former Speaker De Venecia in 2006 tried to engineer a shift to parliamentary government, but nearly sparked people power. So what might be President Arroyo's own preferences, her own devout wish, now that Pimentel's proposals are on the table? We might find out in July when she delivers her State of the Nation address. But what's interesting is that it's the Senate, which fought constitutional change in 2006, that has taken the lead this time around in reviving federalism. What that proposal is what we'll tackle when we return.
To pose this question and this observation. There is no country that has federalized voluntarily, that has broken up. On the contrary, they have, you might say, made a quantum leap in terms of economic development by federalizing. Now, some people say, you look at Yugoslavia, ngayon, Herzegovina, nakabiyak-biyak. But the reason for that is there was no voluntary melding of those states that comprise Yugoslavia, because it was Marshal Tito who forcibly federalized them. Nagkawatak-watak na kasi there was no glue that held the federal country together.
That was Senator Pimentel expounding on one fear that opponents of federalism have put forward, which is that it might actually be a means for splitting our country apart. But even as Senator Pimentel and other proponents of federalism try to answer these questions on a case-by-case basis, why don't we take a look at the Senate proposal as a whole? Now, before we do that, I'd like to welcome to the audience some students from UP, from actually my favorite part of UP, because they're studying library science. So they're the people that we're all going to be running to when it comes to looking for data.